Now that Obama has been re-elected, he has nothing to lose. He can be more flexible in negotiating away our national security with the Russians, and he can engage in his long-dreamed-of war on legal gun owners. But did he engage in a secret war against gun owners in his first term? There is precedent for it. Local governments sued gun manufacturers to try to put them out of business. Bill Clinton made a secret deal with Smith & Wesson. In exchange for immunity from lawsuits, Smith & Wesson would agree that they would only sell to stores that performed background checks and had other restrictions that Bill Clinton could never get through Congress. Because Smith & Wesson was one of the biggest gun sellers, it was thought that the gun dealers would acquiesce. In fact, the plan backfired. Gun stores and gun owners rebelled. They refused to buy Smith & Wesson's guns. Smith & Wesson's business was badly damaged, and they were forced to sell. The clever attempt to put gun restrictions in place without going through Congress was a total failure. Did Barack Obama think that he was smarter than Bill Clinton? Did he come up with a scheme to demonize gun owners and force gun restrictions? Before we put new gun laws in place, we need to know what happened with Operation Fast and Furious. In 2009, the Obama administration made a big push to tie gun sales in the United States to gun deaths in Mexico.
It is drug demand in the United States, which drives the drugs north across our border. And we have assault weapons and other guns coming south illegally to arm the drug gangs against the Mexican army and police. That's why we say it is a shared responsibility.
U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder says 90% of the weapons used in Mexico originate in the United States.
And the reality is that too many weapons are flowing from the United States and into Mexico and having a negative impact on the government of Mexico's ability to fight the narco traffickers.
I commend Mexico for the successes that have already been achieved. But I will not pretend that this is Mexico's responsibility alone. A demand for these drugs in the United States is what is helping to keep these cartels in business. This war is being waged with guns purchased not here, but in the United States. More than 90% of the guns recovered in Mexico come from the United States, many from gun shops that line our shared border. So we have responsibilities as well. We have to do our part.
The liberal media helped push the argument that U.S. gun sales were tied to Mexican deaths.
In Mexico, the firepower has become overwhelming. Police yards filled with trucks and cars riddled with bullets. Drug lords aren't just killing cops, they're sending a message with U.S. purchased guns that they are the ones in control.
In the vicious Mexican drug war, the police are often outgunned by the traffickers.
They're seeing bloodshed after bloodshed, kidnappings, extortions, you name it.
Mexican officials say they too have a national security threat. Thousands of high-powered weapons from the United States in the hands of traffickers.
Guns from all over the United States, not just the southwest border, are going into Mexico. This is a national problem.
Officials say more than 90% of all the traffickers' weapons are obtained from dealers and gun shows in the U.S., where firearms laws are more lenient than in Mexico.
The claim that U.S. gun sales were tied to Mexican deaths extended from the administration to the news media to political action groups.
First of all, the problem that is occurring in Mexico is one that we are contributing to. It's one that our weak gun laws are contributing to. The estimates that we are getting from the Mexican government as well as the United States government make it clear that between 90% or 95% guns that they're finding in Mexico being used by the gangs, by the cartels, are coming from the United States. We've got nearly 7,000 gun dealers on the border of Mexico in states like Arizona and Texas. Those are states that have notoriously weak gun laws, and our country as a whole has notoriously weak gun laws. Those notoriously weak, nearly non-existent gun laws make it very easy for for dangerous people to get these guns. If the United States is going to help Mexico deal with this problem, the United States needs to enact some gun laws to make it harder for dangerous people to get guns.
But what was the purpose for the administration's big push? It turns out it was all about a treaty.
A renewed effort tonight that could curtail our Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms if President Obama has his way. He wants the Senate to ratify a little-known treaty that would create a national registry for guns. Under that treaty, other nations would be able to identify gun owners in the United States.
President Obama went to Mexico and brought back a 12-year-old treaty.
I'm urging the Senate in the United States to ratify an inter-American treaty known as CIFTA to curb small arms trafficking that is a source of so many of the weapons used in this drug war.
The treaty signed by President Clinton in 1997 was never ratified by the Senate. It calls for the institution of a regime of gun control never before seen in the United States, creating a gun registration system that would be open to international sharing. Offenders would be prosecuted under treaty law, and they would be eligible for extradition. Proponents like Senator Dick Lugar are urging passage.
But then the president's plan fell apart. At the same time they were blaming gun stores in the U.S., they were actually the ones who were sending guns to Mexico that were killing Mexicans.
One of the men on the front lines of the drug war is telling a very different story to CBS News, making an accusation that could cost him his job. An agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms claims the agency has a policy that is actually putting guns in the cartel's hands. Here's investigative correspondent Cheryl Atkinson.
John Dodson, a federal agent, says what he was asked to do was beyond belief.
You were intentionally letting guns go to Mexico.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, the agency was.
An alcohol, tobacco, and firearms senior agent assigned to this Phoenix office since 2010, Dodson's job is to stop gun trafficking across the border. Instead, he says he was ordered to sit by and watch it happen. Investigators call the tactic letting guns walk, in this case into the hands of criminals who would use them in Mexico and the U.S. Dodson's bosses say that never happened. Now he's risking his job to go public.
I'm boots on the ground here in Phoenix and telling you we've been doing it every day since I've been here.
CBS has been pursuing a story over the past week or so about gun running in Mexico, hundreds and hundreds of guns going into Mexico with the knowledge of ATF. They had hoped it would lead them to the big fish, but it didn't work. And there are two developments on that today. There's an IG investigation been ordered at Justice, and Mexico has asked for whatever details the United States can provide on that. Do you have any comment on the story and on these developments today?
Chip, I don't. Obviously, as the president pointed out when he spoke here with President Calderon, we take the issue of the flow of guns south very seriously, as we do the issue of the flow of drugs north. And but beyond that, I don't have any comment.
Attorney General Eric Holder was caught lying to Congress. No one was held accountable. Even worse, he refused to turn over 80,000 documents that he admits exist. Formal subpoenas were issued. Refusals were made. After a year and a half of waiting, Congress had had enough, and contempt proceedings started against the Attorney General of the United States.
We're here because when we asked legitimate questions about Brian Terry's murder, about Fast and Furious, we were lied to. We were lied to repeatedly and over a 10-month period. We know enough to know that we have people who have told us under penalty of criminal prosecution, they have told Congress and their employees certain documents exist, and we've asked for those documents, and we've been denied them. We're here today for the first time in over 200 years to deal with an Attorney General who has flat refused to give the information related to lies and a cover-up exclusively within his jurisdiction. And a contempt report is ordered.
The contempt vote against Holder went forward despite a last-minute attempt by the White House to prevent it by invoking executive privilege to shield the Justice Department documents at the heart of this dispute. But Darrell Issa, the chair of the Government Oversight Committee, said the time for such maneuvers had passed.
The frustration of this committee in not getting documents for a year and a half must be satisfied today. And
Issa wants internal Department of Justice emails to help him determine whether the department was trying to cover up Fast and Furious when it initially denied the operation's existence in February 2011.
Should the Obama administration be permitted to hide 80,000 pages worth of documents? Should they simply be taken at their word that there's nothing there to look at? What standard should we apply to such requests?
His word, trust comes from transparency, and Mitt Romney comes up short on both. You see, this is about more than just a piece of paper. It isn't personal. This is about leveling with the American people.
Of course, Harry Reid was talking about Mitt Romney, but doesn't the same thing apply to Barack Obama? Agent Brian Terry is dead. Hundreds of Mexicans were killed, and it was the U.S. government that was secretly sending weapons that caused these deaths. What are in those 80,000 pages of documents that the Obama administration will not allow the public to see? Will it show that Barack Obama knew about the gun running? Will it show that Barack Obama authorized the gun running? Or will it show that Barack Obama intentionally planned Fast and Furious as a way to enforce gun restrictions through treaty that he could never get through Congress? In the wake of the Sandy Hook shooting, the Obama administration sees their best opportunity in decades to impose gun control. Before we impose new gun restrictions, though, shouldn't we know about Barack Obama's last attempt to impose restrictions? Shouldn't we see the 80,000 pages of documents that he refuses to let Congress and the public see?